Hey guys, we love to grow stuff, we love to kill stuff, we love to eat stuff, and a big part of that process is freezing stuff. That's what this video is all about. How to get stuff processed properly and stored properly so that you can go a year. We really do go a solid year on our meats and they're still as good as when we put them in. No freezer burn. And there's real science to it actually. The process of packaging it, the process of managing your freezer, not leaving the freezer door open too long, and the different types of freezers. That's what this video is all about. There's a bunch of science we gotta go through first, then we're gonna go through the different ways of packaging. Check out this science, this information. All right, the science of things after they die. First thing that happens is things start to decompose. The cells actually start to break down. And the second thing is microorganisms, or just basically little tiny bugs, start to work their way in and flourish. And those are the things that make your meat taste terrible and kill you. That's what we want to avoid. Both of those things stop. The bugs stop flourishing and the decomposition stops at about 0 Fahrenheit. That's what a freezer does. That's the magic of what's going on in a freezer. So if you can get meat down to that temperature and hold it at that temperature steady, it could be there for 5 years. But we all know that 5-year-old meat usually it doesn't taste too good. That doesn't mean it's not unhealthy. Like, you probably could eat it and not die, but you may wish you were. So what we want to do when we're freezing something is eliminate freezer burn. That's the real enemy. Freezer burn is the transference of the moisture that's inside the meat or even the vegetable, transferring out of the meat through a motion that's going to happen usually from a freeze-thaw action, or any place where there's outside air touching the meat that can cause that to kind of work and capillary its way out. When that moisture, the good water that's inside meat leaves the meat, the cells that it leaves start to just break apart, and it creates that horrible taste that comes with freezer burn. And we don't want that happening. We killed this poor critter. We want it to be perfect, or as close to perfect, as long as possible. So the ways that we avoid that transference. The main thing is packaging. We're going to talk about in the next segment. But the other ways to avoid that transference is to keep it at a dead steady 0 degrees with the least amount of new air coming in and out. You'll find that with new freezers now, they have an automatic defrost. Great idea, keeps the little frost around the edges to a minimum. It's a heater. Sometimes as often as every day, the cooling turns off, a heater turns on, and it melts that. At the same time, it's creating a movement of cold to hot that can be drawing moisture out of whatever you have. So it's one of those modern technology things that's not necessarily a benefit. It actually costs more to run those as well, almost as much as 40% more to run an electric freezer that is defrosting, because it's now also creating heat and it's fighting itself. Sometimes the older clunkers are A, a little bit more efficient, and B, can give you that steady 0 degrees and make your meat last longer. Another big problem is opening your door and closing it all the time. It's doing the same thing. It's dumping all the nice cold air that's in there and then has to reheat. Also, the moisture from the house is now re-entering into that space, and all that can start on a molecular level moving the moisture out of the meat. There can be another problem with your freezer being too empty, so that it just only has a few items in it and the rest of it's cold air. Cold air is much more likely to dump out when you open the door. If you don't have enough stuff in your freezer, grab a bunch of jugs of water and put them in there and freeze them, just so now you have that giant thermal mass that will reduce that dramatic change in temperature as you open the door. That's the other discussion on freezers, of course, is upright versus chest freezers. There could be whole battles and wars fought over that. For me, I prefer an upright, even though, yes, the cold air dumps out every time I open it. at the very least, when I open it, I can find what the heck I went in there to look for. With a chest freezer, it is very difficult to keep it organized. Unless, I mean, if you butchered 40 turkeys and you put them all in a freezer, it's all turkeys, it's easy to find. If you have a variety, you have one freezer, I lean toward that. But put your comments below, and if you have an opinion there, or if you want to fight about upright versus chest freezers. So the other piece of nerd science here is the size of the crystals. What we want when something freezes, we want small ice crystals within the meat or the vegetables. Those are less likely to transfer that moisture out. The way to create small ice crystals is to freeze it quickly. If it freezes slowly, the crystals are larger. So this, if you think about it, okay, you killed the deer, you put it in the, you've got all the meat ready, and you dumped it all in the freezer in one big chunk. Well, that big chunk is going to freeze very slowly, like maybe 2 or 3 days from the outside in. I've had it where I've pulled the thing apart, and the inside it still isn't. The cold hasn't transferred through. So it's a good idea in your mind to space it around in the freezer so that you have air going around and cooling it. Also, you want to plan ahead, make sure your freezer is as cold as it possibly can be for that initial dump, or even use a couple freezers at once, get things cooling in different places, and then combine it into the freezer. That's going to get you your best chances of managing your freezer, which is a part of this. The other part of it is managing the packaging, and that's what we're going to talk about next. All right, there's basically 4 or 5 ways to freeze. I'm going to go through them as quickly and effectively as possible. The first one, and the tried and true from forever and ever, is freezer paper. If you plop a piece of meat on here, origami that thing shut, put a piece of tape on it, it's going to last for a fair while. And it's going to cost you about 6, 8 cents, depending on how big your piece of paper is. It's not going to last you all year. There's too many opportunities for air to transfer, to get in and out. So what a lot of people do that want to get more time out of it is they first pre-wrap their meat in a saran wrap. So you put the saran wrap down, meat on top, and push as tightly as you possibly can against it with that saran wrap. Then, the problem with the saran wrap, though now no moisture is coming out. It's going to hit that, basically it's going to hit that plastic that's nice and tight against the meat, and it's going to be stuck there. It's like hitting a dam, basically. The problem is, when you throw that in the freezer, bang, bang, it's going to get knocked, and that thin plastic is going to get broken. So they back that up with a nice wrapping of freezer paper. The freezer paper isn't all bad. I mean, it does have a plastic coating on the inside. It does hold back air, especially if you get your origami moves right. And there's lots of good videos you can check out for how to do that. One note here, not all saran wraps or wraps are the same. Some of them are vapor-bearing plastics and some of them aren't. Saran is, this Glad cling wrap is, some of them aren't. That's something you want to check into. However, overall, between the time and the potential for failure here, this is not my favorite way. I know a lot of people who do it, but I will never do this again. The next thing is Ziploc bags. Sometimes this is the best answer. My wife does a lot of applesauce, and Ziploc works really well for that. Although I don't use, I'm actually kind of picky here. I really found these Glad freezer bags to be the roughest, best seal and the best plastic. These are not all the same. This is this is called a zipper bag or a food storage bag, not a freezer bag. The plastic that these bags are made out of actually allows air to go through. That's what we don't want. That's what that science nerd was talking about. So do not use storage bags for freezing. But consider using these. These really, I've used these for perch. We fillet and put up about 1,000 perch a winter. And for years I've used these Glad freezer bags. I've actually got a link down in the description to almost every product we talk about here. I'll put a link there so you can see what it is. But those bags work well, still has some weaknesses. A, if it gets bonked around in the freezer and it gets one little mark on it, you'll see right on that mark, there starts to be a little bit of white showing up there. That's because that dehydration, that freezer burn is happening. What I do there is I'm very careful with my fish particularly. I set them in a place in the freezer where they're not going to get rummaged through and they're going to be left in a pristine way. I've also got a trick. There's another video. I've got a bunch of videos on my site. I've got a trick on how to get all the air out of the package by submerging it in water and zipping it shut underwater. So these are a good option, but they're still not the best option. The next thing is the good old food saver. This is a vacuum packing machine. You guys, probably this isn't news to you. These have been around for a while. Shoot, you can get these for as little as 30 or 40 bucks. This one's like a $110 model. It's pretty darn good for what it does. The challenge here is the bags, particularly if you buy them from the store directly in small quantities, can be as much as 25 cents a piece. Those zipper bags can also be 11 to 20 cents a piece. But I would highly recommend to buy them in bulk online. I can show you some links there. That's what we do. These are 3.5 mil. You can get 5 mil. They're more expensive. And I found the 3.5 to be pretty darn effective. So I would go with that. You put your food in. You put it over this vacuum thing. This is where the gasket happens. It's this foam to this foam. A trick here is to get that wet. Have a paper towel nearby that's moistened and moisten that. That'll give it a better suction and it's going to pull the air out of the bag, and then there's a heat strip here that's going to seal the top of the bag. That's pretty darn good, and I've done this a lot and it works pretty well, unless you have moisture in your meat. Or particularly with fish, you pull that moisture up and you get a disaster here because the sealer doesn't quite seal and things don't work. Also, it takes a fair amount of time and you're working it and it gets noisy, and I'm not going to fling this, but I'm tempted to, and there's been a few days I've been very tempted to when things don't quite work there. So this brings us to what I believe is the apex of the whole freezer game, which is a vacuum chamber sealer. These things used to be crazy expensive. Restaurants and butcher shops and stuff would use them, but they were $6,000 or $7,000 a piece. Now they've made units that are more for homeowners, for us small type people. One big advantage here is the bags. These can be as little as 3 to 8 cents a piece, compared to even the ones you buy in bulk here are going to be 11 to 12 cents a piece quite often. The food saver, the vacuum bags need ridges. It needs a little bit of space for air to be pulled around, and that, I think, just in manufacturing costs more. Chamber vacuum bags can be smooth as a cucumber, and that makes them cheaper, and they work really well because the vacuum bag, you got to check out, I've got a couple videos of these. These things just work differently. You put your meat in here, you place the top against the heat strip, you close it, and it sucks all the air out of that space, so it's like outer space in there. But the meat, the bag, and whatever the material is inside there doesn't know things have changed until it is sealed and the pressure is released. So it's like you went to outer space, zipped it shut, and then came back to Earth and all the Earth pressure hits it again. All of a sudden, you've got a sealed bag that's like 100%, or as close to 100% as I think you can get in this natural world, of air out, and it's a double seal. So now we don't have that air issue anymore, and it's a pretty cheap and effective way to seal it. I mean, the downside is, these could be as, around 100 bucks. The cheapest one of these is about, this one I think was 350 bucks. That's about the base level. You can work your way up to $1,200 fairly quickly. But if you're going to be doing this a lot, I think it's the way to go. So that's the majority of what I recommend for freezing meat. I really appreciate you watching. Please check out over our channel. We've got a whole bunch of different ways to get meat, fishing and hunting and even gardening. And we've got a bunch more methods on packaging and details there. Please leave any sort of a comment below with any other ideas, and thank you for watching.